The night pressed in, heavy with secrets from a land where legends linger. Long ago, there was a girl, her home lost in the lush expanse of the Mekong Delta, though she now lived in the teeming streets of Saigon. Her story unraveled from the fragments of childhood memory, drawn from those soft golden summers more than 2 decades past. Every summer, as the cicadas sang, her parents would take her to stay at her grandmother's house, nestled just 10 kilometers away. There, the air carried both the scent of ripe fruit and the quiet shiver of old stories. Near her grandmother's cottage stood a clearing, about 300 square meters of empty land, its heart marked by the shadow of a towering tree. Its heavy leaves wove together, casting shade deep and cool, tempting the children of the neighborhood to gather beneath its branches. Day after day, a small brigade of childhood friends would drift to this spot under the tree at the edge of her grandmother's village. As midday pressed on, they would slip away from watchful eyes and let their laughter echo against the trunk, oblivious to the darker mysteries lingering just beyond. From beneath the tree, you could see the far end of the field, and there, a dense bamboo grove hunched at the boundary. Time had stained this patch of land with unnatural history. Older folks whispered of what once grew there, a grand, ancient cotton tree. They said that within its gnarled, soaring limbs dwelled a creature known only as the demon with a missing leg, Gio. Fear haunted the village whenever the name was spoken. Too many had felt its cold, invisible grip, the way it crept up unexpectedly and squeezed until breath became prayer. Offerings were made, incense burned in trembling hands, but nothing eased the demon's anger. As long as its tree stood, it tormented the people, drawing forth their terror with impunity. Determined to free themselves, the villagers called upon men from both near and far to take an axe to the cotton tree. Yet every attempt failed. Sacrifices were given, rituals performed, but the tree would not yield. Some would find their limbs paralyzed by sudden, excruciating cramps as soon as the blade touched bark. Others destroyed their saws and axes, metal snapping and splintering as if the tree itself was defended by an unseen force. One afternoon, after yet another failed attempt, a man, his cheeks red from drink, his steps unsteady from too much rice wine, staggered upon the scene. Frustrated and brash, he raised his voice against the fear that held the village captive. In the haze of his drunken bravado, the unidentified man slurred insults at the gathered villagers. "What's wrong with you all? Can't even chop down a stupid tree? Step aside. I'll do it myself." Clutching his machete, he stumbled toward the ancient cotton tree, the one everyone believed harbored Gio. He raised the blade, hacking into the gnarled trunk. The ground shuddered underfoot, faint tremors rippling through every nearby home as if the earth itself recoiled. Then, with a thunderous crack, the cotton tree toppled, crashing to the earth in a cloud of dust and ancient bitterness. Villagers rushed to the scene. There, beneath the fallen limbs, lay the unidentified man. Miraculously unharmed, he slept sprawled at the tree's roots, fingers locked tightly around his machete. Pauses. When they tried to wake him, he did not stir. Only when the effects of alcohol faded did he rouse, and then something was terribly wrong. His mind shattered. He wept, laughed, and screamed without warning. Day after day, he cursed at empty air, gesturing wildly toward the place where the cotton tree once stood. "You devil! I see you! I'll kill you!" he shouted, voice twisting between anguish and madness. From that day onward, the unidentified man wandered the village, a shell of himself, forever marked by the thing he'd faced beneath the loathsome tree. The land never healed after that. The villagers tried to plant rice, but the fields always withered, water refusing to come. Fruit trees and vegetables fared no better, either shriveling in the dirt or refusing to root. When they dug ponds for fish, the water turned stagnant and lifeless. Defeated, they let the ground go barren, and after a time, they used the forsaken land, for graves. In the end, only 3 tombstones remained. 3 solitary mounds left when even the dead had been exhumed and moved away. Over time, a thick bamboo grove emerged around those graves, growing wild and dense, its green shadows swallowing all light. The elders warned every child, if you must cross the field, never enter the bamboo. Play where the thee tree gives shade, but never ever step among the graves. The children remembered, huddling beneath the thee's gentle canopy, always glancing toward the brooding green thicket that marked the village's haunted heart. So each summer, when the unnamed woman returned to her grandmother's house, she and her friends would gather just as always beneath the great thee tree, never daring to stray near the bamboo where the cursed earth lay restless. One hot afternoon, as the children played, laughter ringing out beneath the spreading branches, a strange boy drifted among them. His face was pale and drawn, unfamiliar even to the returning unnamed woman. She recognized the other children, but not this one. Wordlessly, he fixed his hollow gaze on the laughing circle, lingering at the edge of their game. None of the children, nor the elders of the hamlet, recognized the strange boy. His face was thin and hollow, his eyes dull and distant. Yet, when he asked, "Can I join your game? Please, let me play with you," the children, innocent and eager for company, welcomed him in. He told them his name was Fong. Every day after that, as noon's heat pressed on and the scent of old bamboo mixed with sun-baked grass, the children crept from their houses and gathered on the barren land. Each day, at the precise stroke of 12, Fong appeared. He would slip into their circle as though he'd been waiting all along. At first, the children thought nothing of it, but over time, curiosity gnawed at them. One afternoon, as they gathered in the mottled shade, a girl asked Fong, softly hesitant, "Where's your house? Do you live nearby?" Fong only stared ahead and offered no reply, only asking once more, distantly, "Can I just play with you?" Another boy tried, "What school do you go to?" Again, silence, only a gentle, persistent plea to be allowed to play. A quiet suspicion began to settle among the group. Whispers passed between the children. None had ever seen Fong outside of the vacant land. None had any idea where he slept, ate, or belonged. It was always the same. He would arrive at noon, never a minute early, never a minute late, and vanish before dusk. One day, as the children plodded beneath the thee tree, one said, whispers, anxious, "Let's follow Fong. Watch closely, see where he comes from, and maybe where he goes after." As noon approached, the children huddled, eyes fixed on the shadowy edge of the bamboo grove. When Fong emerged, he came from deep within the thicket, from the direction of the 3 lonely graves nestled beneath the largest stalks. But the children were too young to harbor the superstitions of their elders. Softly, as if brushing off unease, they saw nothing sinister, just another child seeking play. And so, they let their curiosity fade and resumed their games. Late one sweaty afternoon, boredom set in, and Vu, the outspoken boy, grumbled, restless, "This game's no fun. Let's play hide-and-seek instead." Laughter rippled through the group. They agreed, scattering among fallen branches and tufts of wild grass. The first one found became it, and soon it was Vu's turn to seek. He uncovered each friend in turn, except for Fong. Minutes passed, then hours. Vu called out, louder, a note of worry. "Fong, are you still here? Where'd you go?" Only silence answered. As the afternoon wore on, worry thickened in the humid air. The children searched every corner of the old field, between splintered roots and along the edge of the bamboo thicket. By 3 o'clock, then 4, still no trace of Fong. Shadows spilled across the graves as the sun began to dip. Not a sound, not a sign. Time dragged onward, and unease curdled into fear. The search stretched until nearly sunset, yet Strange Boy was nowhere to be found. The search dragged on, with the afternoon sun slanting long shadows across the tangled ground. It was Vu who spoke up, his voice jittery and impatient. "Let's try the bamboo grove. Maybe Fong is hiding back there. An uneasy silence passed between them, but the group shuffled forward, boots crunching over dry weeds, inching toward the haunting cluster of graves. As they neared the three moss-covered mounds, all chatter died. There, leaning against one gravestone, shoulders slumped in a strangely peaceful posture, sat Fong. The boy's skin looked translucent in the dappled light. Relief crashed through the children, mixed with a terror they could not explain. "How can you be so brave?" one girl blurted out. "Why'd you hide here? Didn't the adults warn you not to come near?" Others chimed in, trembling. "Fong, it's dangerous here. Come out. We're not allowed in this place." Fong looked up, a smile flickering across his lips, serene and vacant. For a heartbeat, everything felt quiet, suspended. But something shifted in the sultry air. Suddenly, without warning, a furious shout erupted behind them. An old man stood as if conjured from thin air, his face burning red with rage, the whites of his eyes wide and wild. He glared from 20 meters away, his voice cracking the silence like thunder. "You dare come here, you who shout and make mischief among the graves!" His curses spiraled, spit flying, words barbed and sharp. "Do you believe I won't catch you, you little fools? Do you want to stay here forever?" Terror rooted the children to the spot. Their knees buckled, hands fluttering in nervous gestures of apology. "Sir, we're sorry. We won't do it again," Vu pleaded, his voice thin with fear. "Please, uncle, we didn't mean to." The others echoed, shaking. "Please, we're sorry. We'll leave right away." Yet the man's rant continued. Relentless and venomous, growing louder even as the children shrank inward. Instinct howled. Hearts hammered. Someone called out, "Let's go!" In their scramble, they glanced back. Fong had vanished. Not a whisper of movement, not a sound. The only proof of his presence was the chilling imprint where he had leaned against the grave. Panic swept through the group. They tore from the bamboo grove, legs numb with dread, scattering to their homes. Not one dared speak of what they had seen, not even to their elders. That night, the unnamed woman tossed and turned, feverish beneath her sheets. A thick, restless heat seemed to smother her, and the world pressed in with sickly, supernatural weight. Her grandmother hovered nearby, tending her with wet cloths and bitter medicine, but the fever would not break. By dawn, she could scarcely swallow her spoonfuls of gruel, and her grandmother coaxed, "Eat, then rest a little. Child, you must recover." Lulled by exhaustion, she lay back, half awake. Her grandmother, trusting sleep had come, slipped next door to visit a neighbor. Alone, in the hush just before noon, unease gnawed at her. Uneasy, under breath. It was as if her heart burned from within, pulling her thoughts restlessly toward the blank, wide fields, toward the ancient tea tree, toward the forbidden patch of graves. She knew, without knowing how, that she would have to return. Some nameless promise or debt or fear whispered. If she did not go, Fong would believe the group had scattered. That the bond of play, the strange magnetism that had drawn them together, would fracture if she ignored this calling. Driven by fever and exhaustion, the unnamed woman found herself powerless against the strange urge whispering through her thoughts. She could not shake the compulsion to return to the thigh tree, where she and the others once played with Fong, the mysterious pale boy whose presence lingered somewhere between friend and specter. Despite her body's frailty, legs barely supporting her weight, she dragged herself toward the door, mind clouded, yet insistent. At that moment, her grandmother returned, brow knitted in worry. "Why are you out of bed when you're so sick? Why aren't you sleeping like I told you?" Grandmother's voice was almost pleading, but the woman, overcome by a restless weariness, could only mutter, "I want to go play by the tea tree, Grandma. Please let me go out there. I want to play by the tree." "That's nonsense. You're ill. Inside now. You can't go out when you're like this." Despite her grandmother's scolding, the unnamed woman began to cry, her voice cracking with desperation and fever. Crying, "Please, Grandma, let me go. If I don't, Fong will think the group is finished. If I don't go, he won't come back. Please, let me go see my friends." The words came out broken as she sobbed, her body racked with exhaustion. Her head spun, the world tilting around her, and everything went black. When consciousness returned, she was no longer at her grandmother's house, but home with her parents. Blinking in confusion, she looked up to see her mother sitting vigil by her side. "I'm home now. Mom?" From beside her, her mother answered quietly, "Yes, you had a terrible fever. Your grandmother called. We came and brought you home." Days passed in a haze. For 3 days, fever held tight, but slowly, the unnamed woman's strength returned. Only later would she learn that her ordeal was not hers alone. It was then that the adults confessed what had happened to Vu, her close friend from her grandmother's village. The same night the children's screams had faded into the bamboo, Vu was gripped by a fever that burned hotter and lasted longer than her own. He wept and cried through the night, calling out in terror to his parents and aunts. Trembling, panicked, "My arms, my legs hurt so much. It hurts so much. I'm scared. There's an old man. He's dragging me out to the field. He's beating me. I'm so scared, so scared." His voice rang with genuine terror, but his family, powerless and confused, thought only a delirium brought on by fever tormented him. Through the long night they tried to comfort and calm him, but nothing soothed Vu's terror. By dawn, blood began to pour from his nose. Panic seized the household. At first light, they rushed him to the hospital. Inside the sterile white of the ward, Vu's fear only deepened. He screamed and thrashed, clutching at his mother's arms. "I'm scared, Mom. That man, he wants to take me. His face, he's a demon, Mom, a demon. I don't want to go. I won't go." Dread grew, thick and suffocating, as his cries echoed down the corridors. At the hospital, the nurse brushed off Vu's terror, insisting that his fever was simply making him delirious. Yet, Vu's aunt felt a gnawing unease. She remembered the previous night, Vu's desperate cries, he's dragging me out to the field, he's beating me." Now, Vu shrieked about a monstrous old man with a ghastly face, pleading not to be taken. Vu's aunt pulled his mother aside, urgently. "Let's go see a spirit medium. Something isn't right." Only Vu's father stayed behind, keeping anxious watch over his son, while the others hurried to consult with the local shaman. Narrator's pace slows, heavy with dread. The old shaman listened, grave and unmoving. "Your boy and his friends crossed a forbidden place, laughing, shouting, trespassing in a realm haunted by an ancient spirit. That ghost, it's grown vicious with time. It's no longer human. He's become a demon, and last night, he consumed part of Vu's soul." A sense of fearful urgency. The only hope was to prepare an offering, a meal to beg forgiveness. Vu's aunt and mother rushed home, hands trembling as they cooked, then carried the food to the haunted place amid the curious, uneasy whispers of neighbors. As they placed their offering down, word of what had happened spread, how the children had disturbed something long dead, rousing its hunger. At the same time, the unnamed woman's grandmother, pale with fear for her granddaughter, hastily prepared a ritual meal as well. She remembered how the fever and delirium had pulled the unnamed woman toward the haunted grove, just as Vu had been claimed. She could not risk her granddaughter being devoured as well. Time crept by in stifling tension. The unnamed woman recovered after several days, her body growing stronger, the fever loosening its grip. But Vu remained at the hospital for a week, his ordeal dragging on as fear gnawed at everyone who loved him. When, at last, the doctors released him, grim news weighed heavy on the family. Voice heavy with sorrow. The fever had ravaged Vu's mind, his intelligence now frozen at the level of a small child. Decades passed, but he remained unchanged. a grown man with a child's innocence and confusion. Whenever the unnamed woman visited her grandmother's village and passed Vu's home, an old ache grew in her heart, a sorrow born from that haunted summer and the darkness lurking beside the cotton tree. It was whispered among the elders, "Never play near graves. Do not laugh and shout where the spirits rest." For some souls, especially those tethered for far too long, carry a bitterness that hungers for retribution. When the children trespassed and roused the dead, disaster fell upon them. The doctors could explain Vu's fate as damage to the mind, a fever's cruel legacy, but those who believed in shadows knew otherwise. Even after the rituals, the food offerings, and desperate pleas for mercy, made under trembling breaths, if the spirit refused to relinquish what it had taken, it left its victims broken, adrift between two worlds, their souls scattered. Such was the sorrow that stained the memory of that summer. Ever after, grandparents would warn, "Let the dead have their peace. Choose anywhere but the graves for your games, or risk a spirit's wrath. Risk being hollowed out as Vu was." This was only the first story shrouded in fear that night. As the air thickens and the day darkens, another tale emerges, deeper in the province, where boundaries blur between the living and the lost. The family had lived in Anjiang, but for many years the parents sought a living on the other side of the border, trading fighting cocks in the dust and chaos of Cambodia, while the children, one son and one daughter, remained in the care of their grandmother and aunt. Only much later, when savings had finally trickled home, did the family reunite. They purchased a strip of empty land, a meager fortune carved out from sacrifice and longing. It lay 4 or 5 kilometers from the grandmother's modest home, a quiet place, formless and exposed, ready for dreams to be hammered into its soil. They built a 2-story house. A living room at the threshold, stairs pressed tight against one wall, the parents' room and kitchen trailing behind. Upstairs, the daughter finally had her room. The son, too, though as a boy in a pragmatic family, slept at the front, his bed and desk butting against open air. No wall, no privacy, no shrine to protect him. When all was built and blessed, the family hosted a feast. Relatives and neighbors crowded in, swirling laughter through the new spaces, toasting both fortune and hope. Nothing felt amiss, nothing yet whispered of what waited in the silence beneath fresh plaster and behind thin, empty walls. The week following the family's joyful housewarming passed without incident. But as the days wore on, a troubling shadow crept quietly into their lives. It began on the second week. The father was the first to encounter it. That night, after a furious argument with the mother, harsh words echoing through the walls, he made a decision. "Tonight, go sleep downstairs with your mother," he said to the son, his voice thick from exhaustion and anger. "I'll sleep up in your bed." There would be no sharing a room, not after the fighting. Downstairs, the son curled beside his mother, still a boy, not yet out of his teens. The father, left alone, settled into the exposed, vulnerable bed at the top of the stairs. His only comfort was routine, late-night football, the small screen flickering until 1 in the morning. At last, sleep claimed him. He was drifting on the edge of slumber when he felt a presence. Suddenly, a woman glided across the darkness, a strange, wretched figure with wild, tangled hair that poured over her face, masking every feature. Her body, naked and spectral, was appallingly clear beneath the moonlight slicing through the window. Without a sound, she hovered toward the father lying on the bed. She pressed herself down upon him, heavy, suffocating, pinning him to the sheets. He had felt this before, in the haunted nights of Cambodia, the old, choking terror of sleep paralysis, or something worse. But he did not cry out. He did not pray, nor did he fight. He simply endured, gritting his teeth in silence. At last, the woman's weight lifted, her image dissolving into nothing. Shaking, exhausted, sweat drenched his body. Still, the father, too tired now to care, sank back into the mattress, and surrendered himself to bitter sleep. Morning came. He spoke nothing of what happened. Fearful of upsetting the family, he kept his nightmare secret. A few days passed, then it claimed the daughter. That night, she dreamed. In her vision, the woman appeared. Again, hair wild and thick, face smothered in black strands. The daughter saw her, naked and raw, chasing, always chasing. The woman's voice rang out behind her, shrill and insistent. "Stop! Stop! Stand still!" The daughter ran, heart pounding, legs burning. At first she was quick, outpacing the creature, but exhaustion soon dragged at her limbs. Sleep's oppressive force slowed her down. In that final moment, the woman caught her, cold fingers locking onto her shoulder. She startled awake, heart thundering, lungs aching. Beside her, the world was silent and still. The clock glowed, 3 a.m. The daughter shivered and sat upright, trying to calm her racing pulse before slowly lowering herself back beneath the covers. By morning, she told her mother, voice trembling with fear, what had filled her sleep with dread. The mother nodded, offering comfort, convinced it was nothing more than a bad dream. "It's nothing, child, just a nightmare," she whispered, desperately hoping it was true. The mother and the daughter said nothing of the nightmares and sightings, keeping their terror to themselves. The men of the house, father and son, remained oblivious, unaware of the shadow snaking through their home. But 4 or 5 nights later, it became the son's turn to live the story. That night, he lay wide awake while the rest of the house dozed in uneasy slumber. The old Nokia in his hand blinked with the last of his nightly text messages, and as the clock crept toward midnight, his friend's final reply faded. "I'm too tired. Let's sleep. No more texting." He set the phone aside and rolled onto his back, planning to sleep. But a sudden urge stirred within him, an insistent need to visit the bathroom downstairs. He crept down into the darkness and, when finished, made his way back up the stairs. The house felt still and close. The ordinary shadows stretched into hungry silhouettes. As he returned, he glanced up at his sister's bedroom door, just in time to see a shape glide across the landing, moving in a blur from her door straight to his own sleeping space. At first, he caught only a fleeting impression and assumed it was his sister. Hi, is that you? Haven't you gone to bed yet?" he called out, hesitant, his voice echoing up the hollow stairwell. No answer. Silence pressed in. He frowned, annoyance mingling with unease, and climbed another few steps, this time his gaze drawn instinctively toward his bed. And then he saw her. The spectral woman sat on the very edge of his bed, her tangled hair veiling her face, her naked form pale under the faint light. Her legs dangled off the high frame, swinging slowly back and forth, as if oblivious to his presence. Not a shred of clothing concealed her. On her chest, the curved outline of her breasts was clearly visible. In that instant, his body seized with terror, the urge to scream tangled in his throat. Were it not for that bathroom trip moments before, he would have lost all control. Limbs numb, heart battered by panic, he staggered backward. He couldn't force himself up those last stairs. He whirled and bolted, rushing down the staircase, his breath sharp and wild, and flung himself into the parents' room. "Me! I just saw something!" "There's someone upstairs. She's sitting on my bed." The parents, startled half out of sleep, exchanged pale glances, but they didn't go upstairs to see. Instead, they called him close. "Stay here tonight. In the morning, we'll see what to do." The son dared not protest. He crawled onto their pallet, tremors still racking his frame. The old clock ticked on. 12, then 1, and beyond. And still, the night was not done. At 4 a.m., the daughter herself raced down the stairs, her screams splitting the darkness. The parents sat bolt upright as she burst in, wild-eyed and gasping. "She's back, the woman, with the tangled hair, no clothes, the one I dreamed about. She grabbed me. I couldn't breathe. She was right there." A nameless dread settled over the family, heavier than any nightmare. Upstairs, the shadows waited, silent and thick. That night, as dread snaked through the house, the daughter's voice trembled in the early dawn. "Mom, it was her. The woman from my dream chased me again. She climbed onto my bed. She pinned me down. I couldn't breathe." I was so scared. I started reciting prayers. Her hands let go, and I ran down here. Both siblings, terrified and gasping, hid in their parents' room until first light. No one slept. Only in the new day's frail sunlight did the family finally gather and whisper what had haunted them. It was then that the truth surfaced, one terrible secret layered atop another. The father admitted, in a halting voice, that he'd been the first to see the spectral woman. The daughter's nightmare was not hers alone. Now both son and daughter had witnessed her, and it was clear that something old and hungry nested within their home. The mother, her voice uneasy, questioned why she alone had seen nothing. There was a strange coincidence. The father, daughter, and son were all born in the year of the cat, an unlucky alignment. Only the mother, born the year of the snake, seemed untouched. The mother suggested, voice tinged with nerves, "Let's ask the neighbors. Maybe they know something about this land." That evening, the father, craving answers, invited his old neighbor across the street, Mr. Hua, a man who'd lived there since childhood, to drink and talk. Drinks loosened tongues, suspicions festered. The father leaned in, voice cautious. "My friend, tell me honestly, anything ever happen on this land? Anyone ever die here?" Mr. Hua, tipsy, furrowed his brow, squinting at the shadows. "Why do you ask that, huh? You've seen something?" The father hesitated, then shook his head. "No, I just want to know this land's history. Your memories go back farther than mine." Mr. Hua sighed. "I've lived here more years than I can count. Long ago, maybe 30 years, a woman named Fuang died right here, on your ground. She wasn't from our neighborhood, came from the next village, but she was well off. Always wore gold, earrings, thick necklaces, rings, bracelets, so much gold it was blinding." He leaned in, eyes clouding with old fear. "One morning, the whole hamlet woke to a commotion. Her body was found here, on this very land, stripped naked, her jewels, her clothes, all gone. They found her body sprawled in the grass, her tangled hair hiding her face. No one knows if it was a lover or a thief, but she died here, left in shame." A silence settled, as if the room itself mourned for what had been unearthed. The tale deepened in unease as the grim truth of the land unraveled. Mr. Hua, his voice tinged with the weight of old memories, explained that after the body of Fuang was discovered, her gold and clothes stripped away, her dignity violated, the land remained void and desolate for decades. No crops took root, no house was built, only wild grass growing in thick, tangled clumps. The shadow of Fuang's death lingered, and no one dared disturb it, until the parents, desperate after hard years in Cambodia, returned and claimed the plot for their family. That evening, the father revealed to Mr. Hua that not only had he seen the spirit of a naked woman with matted hair, but so had his son and daughter, while his wife, the mother, saw nothing. Mr. Hua, sobered by the confession, could only murmur grimly, "You should make an offering to her. Ask for her forgiveness. If she's still here, maybe she'll leave you be." On the following day, the father purchased fresh fruit. The mother prepared a lavish meal, the aroma of steamed rice and savory dishes heavy in the restless air. With trembling hands, they placed the offerings before the altar, beneath the dull light of afternoon. The father pressed his palms together and spoke softly to the space between worlds. "Lady, my wife and I struggled for years across the border. Everything we earned, we saved to return and build this home, to reunite our family, so the children would not be sent away again. We live on your land now. If your spirit is truly here, please send me a sign, a number even. If you help me win, I'll repay you with a great feast, a whole roasted pig in your honor." His plea drifted into the stillness. That night, the father's restless sleep surrendered to a vivid, stifling dream. Phuong appeared at the threshold of his room, her hair a dark shroud, face obscured, her bare form pale in the moonlight. On her arm, she clutched a chicken, silent and unmoving, her gaze locked onto the father for an eternity before she slowly turned away, dissolving into the shadows. Jolted awake, the father shuddered, still feeling the cold presence in the room. "Why? A chicken?" he muttered, unable to shake the image. Come morning, he quietly recounted the vision to the mother. They dared not reveal it to the children. After long, uneasy deliberation, they decided Phuong might be sending them a message. Numbers 28 and 68, representing small and large chickens. The father wagered these numbers that day. Inspired by the dream, he dared even to bet on fighting cocks, venturing to the nearby pit with hope and dread curdling in his stomach. But fate, cruel and laughing, offered no mercy. The father lost everything he wagered. 2, then 3 million gone in an afternoon. He returned home defeated, frustration clinging to him like the lingering scent of incense, and muttered darkly, "Why did she show herself to me? Only to curse me with loss." That afternoon, frustration simmered in the father's voice as he grumbled about losing the cockfight despite the ghost's midnight message. Yet, as dusk deepened and the city lights flickered on, fate shifted its hand. By evening, the parents' gamble finally struck. Their numbers matched, and they won nearly 20 million. Their elation sudden, breathless, and laced with disbelief. In a rush of excitement and gratitude, the parents wasted no time. They hurried out to buy the largest roasted pig they could find, returning home with the offering still steaming beneath its crackling skin. The aroma filled the house as they knelt before the family altar. "Miss Phuong, we've won. We've won nearly 20 million. We bring this roasted pig as thanks. Please, let our family live peacefully here. Don't haunt us anymore. Let our children have a safe home. No more wandering, no more fear." Slow, tense beat. He pleaded for mercy, begging Phuong to stop frightening them. And from that night on, the spectral woman no longer appeared to anyone in the family. No more phantom footsteps, no more midnight dread. The parents, the son, and the daughter lived in rare peace beneath their roof. Yet there was a grim exception. Strangers who visited, those who delivered chickens from Bentra, Dong Tap, and far-flung provinces, would still sleep uneasily. If anyone dared stay the night, the ghostly woman would visit them, sometimes suffocating their breaths, sometimes chasing them through wild, moonlit dreams. Word soon spread, and guests stopped accepting invitations to sleep over. But for the family, the curse had lifted. For nearly a decade, they dwelled safely in the house. But nothing in this world lasts forever. In 2019, the parents sold the home and left, moving to Vinh Xuong, while the son traveled to Binh Duong for work. Whether the new owners ever glimpsed Phuong's wandering spirit remained a mystery. The night pressed onward, and elsewhere in the Mekong Delta, a new tale began to take root. This story belonged to a young woman from Tianjiang, a tale set at her Aunt Tu's house in the outlying town of Go Cong. The house, huddled at the farthest tip of a narrow alley, was shrouded in vegetable gardens. Only the boldest souls ever dared sleep there. Shadows grew deeper at night around Aunt Tu's home. For only 20 meters ahead, separated by a sturdy fence, stood an ancient grave shaped like a fish. It belonged to an old woman who had died generations ago, her mausoleum as formidable as it was strange. The grave loomed just beyond the vegetable fields, facing the house. Behind Aunt Tu's home, another story waited in the darkness. A narrow canal, known locally as a rock, slithered behind Aunt Tu's house. Dense, tangled growth crowded its banks, a miniature forest where black water pooled in secret hollows. To one side of the house, a broad pond gleamed. The other, wild ground stretched into darkness. It was nearly 100 meters before another neighbor's house appeared, each home isolated at the very nerve ends of the hamlet. Aunt Tu's dwelling lay alone, surrounded by the hush of vegetables and the dead. Aunt Tu once confided, her voice wavering in the candlelight, that she too had been haunted in these shadowed nights. That year, her husband worked far away, sometimes gone for months on end, vanishing into distant rice fields. He'd been away nearly 30 days when one night, Aunt Tu awoke with a start. Voices drifted from outside her window, low and urgent. She lay stone still, breath caught, listening. The words were unmistakable. One voice, familiar and gruff, belonged to her husband. The other sounded half mocking, half intrigued. "So you finally come home too? Just back from work, huh?" She recognized her husband's tone, weary yet certain. "Yeah, I just got home. Just now, I swear." Was it really him? Why so late after all this time? Driven by worry and hope, Aunt Tu crawled from her bed and crept to the door. But as she moved, the voices evaporated, leaving only the pulse of her heart and the keening wind. Still, convinced he'd come home, Aunt Tu reached for the main door latch. It swung open with a creak. Silence pressed in. The yard lay empty. No one waited on the threshold. Her husband's shape was nowhere in sight, neither was the unknown guest. Suddenly, a sharp gust, unnatural and frigid, lashed her face. Something invisible reached out, seizing her by the hand. Not with kindness, but with desperate, crushing force. Without warning, she was dragged forward, her feet scrambling to keep up. Whoever, whatever held her, raced with inhuman speed. She ran, stumbling, unable to break free, dragged toward the ancient cemetery just beyond the vegetable beds. Graves loomed ahead. Still unseen, the force yanked her over the cracked earth past the fish-shaped tomb of the old woman, then from one moss-choked grave to the next. Aunt Tu's heels barely touched the ground as she soared. No, was pulled over stones, vaulting one burial mound after another. Please let go, she thought, fear and exhaustion gnawing at her mind. She never wanted to leap, yet her body obeyed that invisible grip. Round and round the cemetery, the shape dragged her in wild circuits, until at last its grip loosened. Her pace slowed, stumbling toward her own open door. There, the unseen hand finally released her. She tumbled inside, dead with fatigue, chest heaving, lungs clawing at the thick night, shivering, voice barely above a whisper. What was that? Who held my hand? Why did it take me running like that?" She collapsed onto her bed, the terror still pulsing through every exhausted limb. The exhaustion overwhelmed Aunt Tu, and she collapsed into darkness as if fainting. The night crawled by, and only when dawn's pale light seeped into her room did she awaken. Pain throbbed in her body. Her arms and legs stung with countless scratches. Pulling her blanket aside, she saw crimson welts and raw scrapes across her thighs, shins, and forearms. The thin cloth of her shorts and sleeveless blouse had offered no protection. Angry red marks slithered from her knees up to her thighs and along her arms where hidden branches and brambles had clawed at her as she had been dragged through the wild cemetery. Aunt Tu shuddered, breathing shakily, still unable to comprehend what had seized her in the night. She could only guess it had been a wandering spirit. But that tale was not the only shadow lurking over her home. There was another story, one that unfolded by the murky canal behind Aunt Tu's house, where a mossy pond waited, and memories did not always belong to the living. It began when Bay, Aunt Tu's much younger sibling, came to visit. Bay, still a child then, loved nothing more than fishing. That day, Uncle Tu said, "Hey, Bay, you're dying to fish, right? I'll take you out to the back canal. I'll gather firewood while I'm at it." Bay eagerly agreed, grabbing his fishing pole, and the two set out together. As Bay settled on the rough grass to fish, Uncle Tu disappeared into the trees, foraging for fallen branches. The afternoon sun drooped low. When Uncle Two returned, an odd silence hung over the canal. Bay sat motionless, back turned toward his brother. Uncle Two called out, "Bay, let's head home. It's getting late. Come on, I'm tired." He raised his voice with gentle impatience. "Bay, do you hear me? I've called you 3 times now. Aren't you listening?" Still, Bay gave no answer, never turning around. A chill crept up Uncle Two's spine. Dropping his bundle of wood, he took a cautious step closer. "Bay, what's wrong with you?" His words seemed to drift into nothing. As Uncle Two drew closer, he called again, voice trembling, anxious. "Bay, are you all right?" That was when Bay at last began to move. Slowly, painfully slowly, Bay twisted her entire small body around to face him, never just the head, but her whole form. What Uncle Two saw rooted him in terror. It was his sister's face, yet her eyes were not her own. Both eyes were pure white, the irises vanished, the whites bulging, blank, emotionless. There was no expression, no smile or frown, just that dead, unblinking gaze. Uncle Two dropped everything, fishing rod, sticks, all forgotten, and bolted, his heart-pounding panic into every footfall as he raced back to the house. When he crashed inside, there was Bay, safe, sitting at the table. "Bay, when did you get home?" he asked, his voice barely steady. "I've been here for ages," Bay replied. "I got bored with fishing, so I just came back. You'd gone off to gather wood, so I didn't wait." She had returned more than an hour ago, she insisted. But Uncle Two knew what he'd seen beside that pond. The ghostly imposter who wore Bay's face, who turned and stared through eyeless, soulless whites. What Uncle Two witnessed had been no living person, but a specter, its face identical to Bay's, yet robbed of all humanity. The eyes, vacant and rolled upward, gleamed with nothing but eerie, unbroken white, 2 pale orbs set in an unmoving mask. Terror rooted him to the spot for a heartbeat. Then, with a cry strangled in his throat, Uncle Two abandoned everything, his fishing pole, the bundle of kindling, and bolted home in a frenzy of panic. When he stumbled through the doorway, he saw Bay already there. "When did you get home?" Uncle Two gasped, breathless, desperation in his voice. Bay replied, confused, casual tone. "I've been back for ages. I finished fishing. It got boring, so I just came home on my own. I've been here for more than an hour." Uncle Two listened to her words, cold sweat crawling down his neck, and realized the truth. The thing he'd seen by the canal, waiting silently with its back to him, had never been Bay at all. A thick silence hung in the air between them, heavy and unnerving. A shifting unease haunted the family home during the days that followed. The family's eldest had recently hired Aunt Hai, Aunt Ba, and several neighborhood women to clean and prepare the ancestral house. As a big celebration, perhaps Tet approached. Prayer tables stood in shadowed corners. The Chow Dai altar glimmered with waxen light, and the separate altar to the old ancestors stood solemn and still. The neighborhood women, notorious for their affinity for the lottery, crowded the house in a flurry of chatter and cleaning. As Aunt Hai polished the ancestral altar, she paused and muttered, playful, scheming voice, "This altar's so grand. Maybe if we pray for some lucky numbers, we'll strike it rich tonight." Cheers and encouragement circled her. Several voices urged, laughing, "Try it. Hai, ask for some numbers for us." Aunt Hai lit a cluster of incense, whispering fervently, then thrust the sticks into the urn atop the altar. Suddenly, her body shuddered, visibly, violently. The laughter faded, replaced with anxious glances. "Hey, Hai, you all right?" one woman called. Aunt Hai turned her head, slowly, almost mechanically, casting a sharp, sidelong look at the group. Her hand rose to twist and coil a strand of hair, the gesture unnatural, childlike. When she finally spoke, her words dragged out, strained, childish voice, each word forced, voice trembling. Outsiders shouldn't come in and light incense on someone else's altar, shouldn't gather here, making noise, joking like this. Outsiders shouldn't ask for numbers here. How foolish. Don't you know better? Her head lolled slightly, a mocking half-smile flickering and dying on her lips, yet her voice remained eerily flat. Every sentence oozed out with effort, as if a small, petulant child was fighting through her vocal cords. The cleaning women stared in mute horror. They knew, then and there, this was no longer Aunt Hai speaking. Something else lingered behind her eyes, something old and angry. No one knew which ancestor's spirit had entered her, only that it demanded respect. Aunt Hai's body seemed to sag, her skin flushed and burning red, her breaths labored. When the spirit finally released her, she collapsed into a chair, exhausted and trembling, the red in her cheeks fading to a ghostly pallor. The house was silent. No one dared joke about lottery numbers again. Yet supernatural tales still clung to the family like shadows. The family patriarch, a woodcutter by trade, often traveled to buy trees from distant villages. People would call for him whenever a tree on their land needed to be felled. One day, as he stepped beneath the thick, tangled boughs of an ancient tree, the profession of woodcutting had never troubled the father. For years, he'd felled trees across the countryside, always careful to offer prayers and incense before striking the first blow. He respected their spirits, and danger never lingered. But that day, someone offered him an entire lychee orchard for sale, a tangled stretch of old nyans in shadowed rows. The deal was fair, and arrangements were made for the father, mother, and their uncle to journey out together, far from their village. They packed hammocks, rice, and food, prepared to stay through noon's heat without needing to return home. All seemed ordinary as the sun crested. By midday, after sharing lunch beneath the ghostly hush of leaves, each strung a hammock to rest. Uncle, not yet drowsy, lingered over his cup of coffee. He stirred absent-mindedly, letting his gaze wander across the untouched ngans. Suddenly, he stiffened. Something flickered between the trees, a thin black shadow darting from trunk to trunk, trembling, quick as a bolt of lightning, but bleak and unnatural, like an inky pulse of electricity. The blackness zipped restlessly, never pausing long enough for him to see its shape. Uncle's blood chilled. His heart knocking against his ribs, he scrambled into his hammock, squeezing his eyes shut. No sooner had he done so than a paralyzing weight pressed down on him, pinning his arms and legs flat. Helpless, unable even to cry out, he struggled as invisible hands crushed the air from his lungs. Panic scraped at his mind. Only with immense effort did he finally wrench himself free. He sat up in a frenzy, just as the father jerked upright, breathless, his chest heaving as if something had tried to suffocate him too. Both men glanced at one another, realizing that the haunting had gripped them at the same time. Moments later, the mother's voice trembled as she sat up, her eyes wide and wild. "I just saw a man," she whispered, still shaking. "A Westerner, tall, skin pale as milk, speckled with black spots. He was furious, screaming at me, cursing in Vietnamese and some foreign tongue. French, maybe English. Dread. He kept saying, again and again, 'Who let you in here? Who let you in?' His voice was all wrong, broken, like someone strangling the words. He tried to choke me. I was so scared." At once, the father and mother hurried away, clutching one another, racing down the long, empty road to the nearest little store. Their breaths were ragged as they bought cakes, incense, and candies, anything that might appease the unseen fury lurking in the trees. They turned to the shopkeeper, desperate for explanation. The old woman behind the counter only nodded grimly, with fatal certainty. "It's no wonder at all," she replied. "That land used to be a military hospital back in the old war days. It belonged to the French, and many died there. People around here have all seen that ghost. He's not at rest." Chilled to the bone, the father and mother returned, bearing offerings. They laid the sweets and incense beneath the trees, whispering apologies into the wind. Only then did the orchard's oppressive grip loosen. The woodcutting resumed, the sinister shadow gone, but the memory, thick with dread, clung to the orchard from then on. This was the last tale the young woman shared. One final, chilling echo from her family's haunted past. With that, the final tale draws to a close. The restless hush of the orchard lingers in the memory of the family, and no offering of incense or sweet cakes can erase the cold touch of the Western ghost, nor the echoing demand, spoken in broken Vietnamese and in furious foreign tongues, asking who had dared trespass upon his land. Dawn returned, dispelling the suffocating dread. Yet for the father, mother, and their uncle, the memory of paralyzing terror and spectral rage would long haunt their dreams. Darkness settles once more as other stories wait in the shadows, some never told, some never forgotten.